Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore and your host for this 1-hour program each Sunday. And as you well know by now, we talk to all kinds of folks on the show, business, professional, nonprofit, and political folks. Our program brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're already looking forward to the 178th Fair coming up August 13th through 17th, and it's closer than you might think. Our guest today, Devon Neary from the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. In fact, he's the head honcho there, the executive director of RRPC. I think it's been a while, maybe a couple of months since you've been on with us, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it was closer to winter time, and really happy to be back. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah, no, it's always great to talk to folks. I had the Rutland mayor on the last 2 weeks, and we've had Tom Giffen in the meantime from the cemetery. He's the cemetery commissioner in the city and also a member of the Evergreen Cemetery Board of Directors. So we try to talk to a whole bunch of different type folks and keep people informed about what's going on, not just here in Rutland County, but throughout the state. The legislative session, as people well know by now, is over, at least the main part of it. We do have a veto session coming up. As a matter of fact, I'm planning on running this, by the way, Devon, on both the 9th and the 16th of June. Mm-hmm. So if you're listening on Sunday, June 16th, tomorrow will be the legislative session day one. And if need be, we'll go into Tuesday, the 18th as well. As we record this show back in May, I don't know what the governor is going to veto and what he won't. I have some maybe indications that he might be doing some things, but don't have anything for sure. So I'm not sure how long a veto session would be, but the legislature in both chambers did adjourn back in, I think it was May 10th. Well, actually, it was probably the 11th because it was Saturday morning before we got done. The Senate finished up at about 1:30. I got home at 3 in the morning, and then the House was a little bit later. I think they gavelled out about 2, and so most folks got home closer to 4 a.m. But it was, I have to say, a mixed bag for me at least. And we can go over some of the things that we did and some of the things that we didn't if you want. But I want to give you a chance right off the bat to talk about what's been going on since we talked to you last. I know we talked quite a bit about housing. You have this big plan that you're working on, and hopefully that's coming together.
Yeah. Let me start, Brian, by just saying, one, congrats on being done with the session. And also thank you to you and the rest of the Rutland delegation for the tremendous effort that this session called for and required. It was my first session as being part of the Government Relations Committee for the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, VAPTA. And while it was a whirlwind for my first time, I've heard from so many people underneath the Golden Dome that it was one for the books, and it was just extremely demanding. It came right down to the wire, especially for the Senate, and hopefully we could really see some good end results from all that effort with some pretty major bills coming down the line. So kudos to you and the rest of the team here. We were very lucky in the Rutland region to have you all senators and reps. So, it's been a few months. We have been busier than ever. It seems like we're only adding more and more every time we pick something new up. We're expanding our offerings to the region and really our impact to the towns, which is really what we do, right? In the absence of county government, RPCs are that critical link between the towns, the state, and the feds, right? So with that, we can talk about one of the biggest endeavors the Regional Planning Commission is working on, and part of that is the housing plan, but more broadly, it's the regional plan. So when I was here last, we were just in the throes of our first public engagement phase. We called that the learn and assess phase.
Right.
That was our most ambitious and robust public engagement effort in the history of our organization. Just to give you some context, we developed a dedicated website. We presented to all 27 towns in the region in person. We held 21 pop-up events across 19 towns. We held 5 that reached more than 500 people. We held 5 open houses in 5 towns that reached close to 100 people. And then lastly, we completed a public survey across the region that gathered more than 1,143 responses, which exceeded our goal of 1,000. So the first things first, sincere gratitude to all those who took the time to share their ideas. And we received some extremely rich feedback that we're now using to incorporate into our actual drafting of the plan. So right now, we just finished analyzing all that input data. We were lucky to have 2 really talented interns, one from VTSU Castleton, a senior, Robert Boucher, and then Vermont Law graduate senior student as well, Courtney Moore. They synthesized all that data, 1,143 responses, of which, there were several open-ended questions. But there are some really interesting takeaways that showed some clear consensus in the region that I think are really interesting. I wanted to share a couple with those with you today because I think it shows that as diverse a region as we are, and from the outside looking in, we may be conflicted at times. I think we really are rowing in the same direction. Where we tend to differ is maybe how to get to the solution, but that's a good place to start from. So, for instance, land use, that's kind of the cornerstone of our work. There's a consensus that people really want to see growth in our downtowns and village centers. They really want to see us preserve and conserve our natural landscapes that they consider to be one of the biggest assets in Rutland County, and we certainly agree. For economic development, everyone rated the diversity of our economy as extremely low. And I think that's something to really think about and analyze as to why have we lost diversity and what are those major factors. There is a real significant interest in seeing growth in industrial manufacturing as well as trades. We know we've talked before, Brian, the average, tradesman's approaching 60 years old plus as the average age. So there is a real need to address this issue. And there's a desire on the flip side to see more workforce development, interns and externships within our local businesses, and expansion of our technical education opportunities. I think a lot of people see the amazing work that the folks at Stafford have done and the just really productive workforce that they've helped develop. And we want to capture that and expand it if possible in any way. For housing, no surprise, lack of affordable housing, lack of affordable rental units, a real need to restore the existing housing, that old and blighted housing that have come offline in recent years, but presents a tremendous opportunity that really is unique to Rutland County. Again, we've talked about this in the past, but we have the oldest housing stock in the state and close to the oldest housing stock in the country. And I think while that is a significant issue, it could pose a potential solution as well. And the last one, which I thought it would be interesting to highlight, is climate resilience. After last summer, and here we are gearing up again, what is going to happen? Everyone's sort of like waiting in the wind to see what July comes, what comes in July, what comes in August, what comes in October, these new significant flooding event months. The region overall said we are not adequately prepared for natural disasters. That was universal across the board. We agree. I think we have some good examples of where it's been done well, like Brandon downtown, when they replaced that huge box culvert that wiped out the Route 7, that withstood the flooding this summer quite well. But especially in those flooding realms and hot weather too. I think a lot of people are concerned with our ability to manage hot weather, and especially those vulnerable populations like children and older adults and people with disabilities that, or low income that can't afford, an air conditioner or a cooling center. And, that's a potential opportunity. So, in terms of where we are now and where we're going, we took all that information and we're working hard to incorporate it into the first drafts of the plan. So right now our planners are hard at work actually typing away, building out the first draft of the plan. Our plan next is our second phase of engagement, which we're calling report back. And that is simply we're taking everything that we heard this winter through our first phase, learn and assess, incorporating it into the plan and trying to show folks and gather feedback as to, did we accurately depict how you feel in this new plan? And was that feedback incorporated properly? That's called our report back phase, and that'll be happening in September. So it's a very long-winded sort of intro into the regional plan world. We still have 2 more years of work on this. We're not planning to adopt until summer of 2026. So we're really just in the thick of it now. We'll have 2 more drafts after the first draft. So we're hopeful that we can really hit the mark on this one, and that the region and especially our towns feel good about what we've produced, and it will chart a course for the future for those next 8 years plus.
Okay. I'm wondering whether you have the ability to find out who filled out the survey in terms of, gender, I guess, male versus female, how many towns were represented in that, all that kind of stuff. Because it could get loaded or weighted one way or another, depending on, if everybody that took it was from the city and they were a male, it would have probably a little different result, right?
You are absolutely right. So we didn't ask for demographic data. We felt like that might be perceived incorrectly, and that we might be trying to data mine information, and people are sensitive to that. So we didn't ask those questions. However, we did ask where you're from. And with that, we use that to direct our outreach efforts. So we had a universal goal based on population for every town. So we had an overall goal of this 1,000 residents in the region. We took that goal and based on population percentage, had a goal for every single town.
Okay. Yep.
We met that goal for every single town. Okay. So we're feeling really good about, proportionally, the voices are there. Obviously, yes, there are more people in Rutland City, so more responded. But we felt really strongly that we needed to gather that input from every corner of the region, because West Haven is very different from Rutland City. Mount Tabor, very different from Rutland City, but their needs are unique and important too. So we are happy to report that we made that metric and we hit that goal. Obviously, it's a challenge because no matter what, it's a snapshot in time and it's a smaller sample size, but we're feeling pretty good about that outcome.
Okay. We talked about the housing piece. There was I think it was a 176-page bill. I'm not very good with the numbers. I know it was a House bill, 876 maybe, something like that. It had to do with both Act 250 reform and
687.
Also 687.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I had the numbers there.
Yeah, they're all there. I don't know how you guys keep it straight.
The 250 and also the housing piece, and I think you're right. And I've mentioned this with the mayor, because we did talk a little bit about housing the last time he was on the program. And while I do think that the designated downtown area is made out pretty well, so Rutland City is going to be advantaged, if you will, with the results of that bill, because for the most part, as long as there's the infrastructure available, which there is with water and sewer, they won't have to do much in terms of developing new housing with 250 permits. They basically will have minimum intersection with the Act 250 folks. On the other hand, those that are not in the designated areas, and this is how I read the bill, I'm a pretty conservative guy, so take that for what it's worth. I think it made it more difficult to develop in some of those other areas, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy. So I know that the ultimate goal of some folks is to have everybody all clustered in one little area, and then a bunch of woods and everything else somewhere else. But I do think there's room for people to be able to develop in an area where they want to buy land and build a house.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Absolutely. 687 is massive, a very expansive bill, and there's still a lot of unknowns, right? In that bill, they've laid out a tiered system.
Right.
So what you're referring to is a tier 1A would be a functionally equivalent zoning regulation and land use regulation that would basically exempt a locality from Act 250 altogether. So in our specific region, you would have to have zoning, you'd have to have subdivision regulations, you'd have to have available sewer and water as well, and the capacity to manage this, right? That's a whole nother piece we won't get into because that is a serious issue. But we've identified a potentially up to 10 communities in the Rutland region that could fall into this tier 1A category. Obviously, this is something that a lot of work has to be done to get to this point. That could be a significant boost. The percentage of land that actually applies to is small, but when you look at the population percentage that it applies to, it's close to 75% of the region.
Okay.
So while I agree, the standard in Vermont planning is historic dense settlement patterns separated by rural landscape countryside. So we want to honor that planning principle, but also understand that there are exemptions to that, and there are caveats, and there are folks that want to live in rural areas. This isn't to say that development won't happen. Those are the tier 2s and the tier 3s. The tier 3s are really those conservation areas.
Right.
And I know there were concerns because when they did an early mapping, they found 8,000 addresses within those tier 2, tier 3, or tier 3 period areas. So that's a concern, and that's something that needs to be worked out, no doubt. I think the road rule is somewhat of a good starting point. I believe they ended up with
I think it was 800.
800 for a driveway, 2,000 for a new road, I think, or vice versa. Again, so many provisions in this bill, it's hard to keep straight. But, where the crux of this bill is for us is it really is going to give a lot of power to the future land use map. This is a regional map that the Planning Commission by statute is required to produce in collaboration with its member municipalities, that basically lays out the different land use areas, right? Like where are the areas we want to develop, where are the areas we want to conserve at the basic sense. We've had these maps for years, and frankly, when you look at one, it's not too surprising, right? You see the pockets in Rutland and Fairhaven and Castleton and sort of those more rural areas along the Green Mountains. But there will be a lot more definition required, no doubt. And we want to make sure that no town is left behind. But in terms of how that'll impact the rate of development in those more rural communities remains to be seen, because we're not seeing a ton of it now. Right. So, where we're seeing our biggest growth in the region is around recreational assets, Wells and Lake St. Catherine, Killington, Mount Holly with the 2 ski resorts. But those aren't areas that necessarily can handle a whole lot of growth. So part of this is how can we efficiently support housing development, especially, and economic development too, while not creating undue burdens on municipalities without any infrastructure, and also really creating unnecessary impacts to the natural landscape. So it'll be a balance, a big one. It's one we're very excited to take on. We're planning through this regional plan update to update our future land use map to these conditions, whether the governor vetoes the bill or not, because we have that ability. Granted, the future land use map won't serve the same role or function if he doesn't support this. But at the end of the day, we feel strongly that this map will accurately model the priorities of the communities that it's going to serve.
Yeah, I'm not sure where Mayor Dunches got the numbers that he opposed, and I'm remembering this, so I could be off a little bit. He said that he felt Rutland County needed 9,000 new homes in whatever you want to talk about, whether it's market price or affordable. And in the city, it was 2,500, I'm pretty sure. So 2,500 in the city and 9,000 countywide. I don't know where those numbers came from. I assume he's got data that shows that that's kind of what we need.
Yeah, so, we contracted with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency last summer to produce a regional housing needs assessment. That produced a range of 3,000 to 7,800, 8,000-ish. So 3,000 to 8,000 units needed in the region.
Okay.
That's a very broad range. And if the level of development or need went back to pre-COVID levels, we'd actually be losing 700 units. So we're talking negative 700 to positive 8,000. Huge discrepancy, right? All sort of trends show that we're probably going to be closer to that upper end of positive 8,000. How many of those will actually end up in Rutland City? It's may even be more than the 2,500 because of because they're about 20% of the region's makeup. So it's pretty close. It could be 2,000-3,000 ish. But yeah, that housing needs assessment isn't the last one. So right now, the regional planning commissions, because of S100, the Home Act last year, are actually required to do two things that are not small feats. One is create new regional housing targets. So we again are working as a state to develop regionalized housing targets with a consultant. That work's going to be beginning pretty soon. From there, the state is telling us we have to disaggregate that housing number per town to say the number, the type, the cost, and several other factors per town. That will not be easy. We don't expect to nail that perfectly. It's going to have to be a range, but I don't think it's going to be as hard as we think in terms of it's pretty obvious where housing can go and can't go. Again, like Ira, Mount Tabor, West Haven, Benson, are those towns going to see dozens of new units? Maybe, but probably not. Right. Whereas, Rutland City, yes. So there's a lot to do on that housing front. And I think we need to support it with really, really good data and thorough planning. Because right now in Rutland County, our problem isn't overdevelopment. It is very much underdevelopment, right?
Yeah. We're talking to Devon Neary, who's the executive director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, and you're on Catamount Community Connection. We're going to take a quick break, and we're coming right back. We are back on Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, and with me on this program is Devon Neary, the executive director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. We've talked a little bit about the housing and the intersection thereof with Act 250 reform. I don't know whether the governor is going to veto that bill or not. As we record this on May 22nd, much of what we're talking about is sort of speculation at this point. We know we have a veto session scheduled for June 17th and, if necessary, the 18th, but we don't know whether it'll be one bill and then we'll go up and take care of it in an hour and come home, or whether there will be more than one bill. If I had to guess, I would think that there's probably 4 or perhaps 5 or maybe even more that the governor probably will veto. Talked about this a little bit with the mayor when we had him on a couple of weeks ago. And one of the bills that did pass was the safe injection site bill. I believe it was H72. Again, not great with remembering numbers. They turn into acts, too, which is always kind of a weird thing for me.
Totally different number on the act, too.
You keep referring all session to S something or H something, and then when it's passed and signed into law, it turns into an act with a whole different number. But anyway.
And sometimes a subname, too. Right? The Home Act.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we did talk a little bit about that. We did manage, thanks to Representative Eric McGuire, who's a city rep, to get I think it's an opt-in provision in that bill. It might be an opt-out, but I think it's an opt-in. In other words, if your community is not interested in hosting one of those sites, it has to be a vote, so it has to be an opt-in. Okay. It has to be a vote of all the people that live in that municipality to say, yeah, we want it, or no, we don't. So right now, we've put, I think it's $1.1 million into the budget. And Burlington, guess why, is the only community so far that is poised to host one of these facilities. There will be some medical people there. Narcan, which I think the regular Noxolone or something like that. That's the actual name of the thing that they give you if you're going to overdose. I just call it Narcan. So there'll be people there, medical people, nurses or whatever, in these sites or in the site. But I went on the floor and I asked the committee chair of health and welfare some questions, and I didn't feel I got really good responses to it. So I voted no on the bill. I'll be very honest about that. I don't think, given our situation in Rutland right now, that we need to attract any more people who, and basically what this bill does, it allows people to just go to the site, wherever it is, and either inject a drug or use it, I guess, snort it or ingest it or whatever drug you're doing. And again, there's people that are watching to make sure everybody's safe, and then people leave. So one of my questions was, okay, if this were to happen and someone's on their way to the site and they have their drugs in the car with them and they run a red light or they go through a stop sign or they get pulled over for some motor vehicle offense, and the officer happens to notice that there's drugs in the car, and all they have to do is say, yeah, but you know what, I'm on my way to the site, so I'm all set, you got to let me go. I didn't get a clear answer. And could they come from Massachusetts and do it? Mm-hmm. Or, how close do they have to be to the site before that sort of protection kicks in? Mm-hmm. I didn't get an answer to that. And then the second one, and we're again putting money into it, it comes from the opioid settlement money. There's a fund that the drug companies basically are paying for, but some of that money is being used to open this site. So there's state money involved. And I said, what happens if someone goes and does whatever drug they do and then leaves and is involved on the way home in a fatal car accident and kills somebody? Doesn't the state have, by extension, some sort of responsibility for that? And again, I didn't really get a clear yes or no. I did get a clear answer to the question that I asked, is this federally illegal? And the answer was, yes, it is. It's absolutely, completely illegal on a federal level. But I didn't get the answers to the other two questions. And the other thing that really bothers me with this, there's no age requirement. So I guess anybody, regardless of age, could get into the clinic and do a drug and leave. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that made me very uncomfortable. But anyway, Mayor Dunches agreed. He said that Rutland is not ready to do this at the moment. I'm not sure if he meant that at some point we would, but he was clear that he was against it. But I think that is one bill that the governor probably will veto. Mm-hmm. And I think there'll probably be a sustainable vote on that. I just don't. It doesn't ring true to me that it's a good policy, but that's above and beyond what you and I are talking about here. And there may be some other bills that come up. There was a renewable energy standard, a so-called RES bill, that I think he probably will veto as well. This would, if I'm remembering correctly, require most electricity providers to be 100% renewable in 5 years, 4 years, no, 6 years, by 2030. And biomass is not included in that. So again, I don't know how people can expect to have that sort of goal reached by 2030. It'd be one thing if it was 2050, but I just don't know. And then, of course, it's, okay, if we do, how much is it going to cost? It can't be any cheaper. It's got to be more expensive than what we're doing now. And the answer is yes. And there's a fiscal note from Joint Fiscal on it that's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to get this thing. So I think probably he will be vetoing that. And there may be some other bills. There's one bill that I can't remember the number on. I don't remember. But I think there's already one bill, and that's it right now. So again, we could be in for a short day or a couple of long days. I don't know. But
yeah, one bill that we were paying close attention to is S213. That's the flood risk bill. Yep. It sounds like it will likely be veto-proof if it is vetoed. But it is the statewide permit for developing in larger river corridors, as well as creating building standards for floodplains as well. I think this is an attempt to make recovery less expensive. So for our work, we work with towns in the region. We're actually working on a big flood bylaw update now because for the first time in more than 40 years, the flood mapping from FEMA is being updated for our region, the whole state of Vermont, but we're one of the last regions. I think we're looking at 2027. So we're meeting with all of our towns now to say, hey, we created model flood bylaws that the state always produces model flood bylaws that the towns can adopt. The Rutland Regional Planning Commission in 2008 produced our own that were of a higher standard. And incidentally enough, most of the towns adopted that. And fortunately, that standard is still above the federal standard today. So a lot of our towns won't have to do anything. But the extra provision within the flood bylaws is this add-on known as river corridors. And these are regulations within the town that prohibit development within a buffer around mapped rivers and streams. They have to be a certain size. We only have 7 of I believe it's 7. It might be 6 of our 27 towns that have these. Because of the piecemeal sort of individual structure of these, it's not very effective, right? Because a lot of towns haven't adopted them because they're worried about over-regulating the community and stifling development. But more importantly, how effective is a regulation that if you're at the lower waters of, let's say, any of the major streams like Clarendon River, for instance, and the upper ends of the river are in towns without any river corridor rules, it sort of negates the whole thing because we're planning on a town level with arbitrary political boundaries when really we should be planning at a watershed level because really you're very limited in what you can do within a political boundary. A river knows no bounds. The river will flood and change its course based on whatever it's going to do. And I think this state level approach has some legs. I think there's some benefit here as long as it's really done intentionally. It's done in collaboration with the towns because, the last thing the towns need is the state to mandate another regulation without much funding or support because we can't handle it. We just don't have the capacity. However, based on what we saw last summer, how many times can we afford to rebuild our state? We can't. We're really in a tough pinch here, and luckily in Rutland County, we got by relatively unscathed. You talk to anybody in Wallingford or Mount Holly, they'll tell differently, or Killington, but generally speaking, we did okay. So I am excited to see where that bill goes. It will mean major implications for our region. The other two that are, they're certainly less high profile than the others, but we testified quite a bit about is S55 open meeting law and H875 the municipal code of ethics.
Okay.
And while both of those are great bills, we've been operating open meeting law under the COVID sort of temporary restrictions for a while now that allow fully virtual meetings. Towns that like it adopted it, towns that don't didn't, right? But it's working okay. This will require towns to adopt more hybrid and require them to record and post the recordings of those meetings. That's great practice. However, I really worry for our small towns like Benson. They don't have broadband internet. They don't have a virtual meeting system. Who's going to pay for that? And how is that going to be implemented? And who is going to actually do it? It's the town with couple employees, maybe. Yeah. And same with the municipal code of ethics. Absolutely necessary. The state required communities to adopt a code of ethics that VLCT helped draft for a lot of communities. And I think we were really interested in moving towards compliance than enforcement. But this is going to require all of our towns, the smallest towns included, to be trained to investigate any of the claims locally, to report to the State Ethics Commission the claims and any of the curing necessary and seek any sort of advice on decisions from the state ethics commissioner. That's a serious bottleneck. It's a serious lift for some of these communities, and for those communities without a town manager or a full-time clerk, the what's known as the ethics liaison position could be somebody on the select board. And, I hate to say it, but is that not a conflict of interest on its face? So, I'm not trying to second guess the intentions of those committees. I think they're right in what they're trying to achieve, but I worry about the implementation and the impacts to our communities for those two bills.
And I did speak with Ted Brady from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns at length. I was a no vote on 875 for the reasons that you listed. I just thought I'll just put it pretty bluntly. I think the state of Vermont put its nose in people's business that it didn't need to. That's how I felt about it. I thought it was way, way, way too much one way, and so I voted no on that. The S55 bill, I believe that came out of the Senate Government Operations Committee.
It did.
And I went in and talked to the chair of that, and I was led to believe that almost everything in that was optional, so that a municipality did not or would not be required to do something online if they didn't want to. Now, if that's not true, then I was misled, because I think I did vote yes on that bill.
That bill did change quite a bit in draft, especially over the last few weeks, and then the crossover. You're correct in that hybrid isn't technically required. It is for all state groups.
Right.
But it did divide boards into two groups, advisory and non-advisory. And if you look at the bill, almost no one is advisory. A few subcommittees, but if you have any sort of authority, any sort of financial power, you then fall into the non-advisory. It is technically not required to be hybrid. However, it is required to record your meetings and post them digitally for public consumption.
Oh.
There's only one way to do that, and that is with a hybrid. Virtual meeting.
See, I thought they could write minutes down on a piece of paper and post those.
No, that's still the law, and that will still be required. Okay. Written minutes are still part of the open meeting law, but this will require, and apparently, we're lucky in our region because we have PEG TV, and the work they do is incredible. And as you know, they try to get out to all the boards and get those uploaded. However, it's not clear as to whether that will count or not, because the town ultimately isn't in charge of that public record. So a lot of questions to be answered there. We are more in the compliance game, right? Like, we want to work hard to help towns achieve their open meeting goals and not just meet the basic letter of the law, but go above and beyond, because we've seen it play out time and time again where if a town doesn't feel informed, there's going to be significant pushback. So we're actually excited. We're hosting our second annual open meeting law training with the Secretary of State. So Sarah Copeland-Hansis will be coming down on June 26th with her team. This will be the second time they've done that. Really appreciate their effort in putting in FaceTime in Rutland County. So we already have about 70 folks signed up, and it's hybrid. A lot of virtual options are in person. But we're asking folks to RSVP and submit their questions online, and you can find that on our website, rutlandrpc.org, because the Secretary of State will actually take those questions and find answers to them and incorporate it into the training presentation. So it's a really efficient way to answer a lot of questions without doing it at sort of in the moment. That'll actually be held at our new office. I don't know if you saw the Rutland Herald article, but we are moving.
I heard that.
Yeah, which is super exciting. Not far. We're about a stone's throw away. We're moving from our current home at the Opera House on Merchants Row, which has been an excellent location for several decades. We're moving out back to Evelyn Street, the former offices of the Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union, taking over that second floor. So it'll be a really nice venue for these types of trainings. And we're hoping that with this new space, which is much bigger, that we'll be able to host a lot more of these, because we're seeing a real gap in the region for these type of events. And it's just, I think the nature of Rutland County, we're quite resilient and we're quite independent. So a lot of times these trainings held at the state level, our towns are just not accessing. So we feel as if we hold something more local, it will be a lot more accessible to them. So we'll see. I think it's promising to have this many folks more than a month out of the event. Sure. So yeah, excited about that.
Well, again, I know Ted Brady testified against the bill 875. Didn't think it was, thought it was an overreach on the part of the state, and I agree. And I did vote no on that. I'm a little chagrined to hear about S55 because I thought they had fixed that. Mm-hmm. My clear message to the chair was I cannot support that if it continues to be a mandatory situation. So, well, the governor always has the right to veto that bill, and maybe we'll be able to sustain that as well. So I'm with you on both of those for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
We need to take one more break, and not sure what else we want to cover when we come back, but by golly, Devon Neary and I will figure it out as we're talking to Devon, who's the executive director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, and we're coming right back on Catamount Community Connection. We're back on Catamount Community Connection, and we're talking with Devon Neary from the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. And our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. The 178th fair is coming up in August, the 13th through 17th. And I keep saying it, but I mean it. We're going to have Robert Congdon on, the president of the Fair Association. And I want to know what's going to be brand new at the on the midway at the fair this year. Who's going to be performing and all of that. So we'll get a chance to get updated with his thoughts in an upcoming show. But back to Devon Neary, and I know you had a couple of other things that we maybe can briefly touch on. We have about 15 minutes or so left.
Sure. Yeah. So in the sort of light of events and upcoming opportunities, one thing we're really excited about is we're partnering with Bennington County Regional Commission, our counterparts down there, and the Department of Housing and Community Development to host a housing development event in downtown Rutland at the Hub Co-works. It will be a network training and resource sharing event, and really will focus ways on how to support the implementation of the Homes for All toolkit. This was a toolkit created by DHCD and some consultants that took several pilot communities, Rutland City being one of them. We mapped out certain neighborhoods, and a lot of these older neighborhoods have empty lots, right? Where a home might have been built, burnt down, it never was rebuilt, or it was just a bigger lot and for a different time, right? So this is really looking at infill opportunities. And what the state did was they took basically standard lot sizes and they created a bunch of prepackaged housing plans for folks to basically plug and play, costs and everything pre-permitted to some degree. So what we're trying to do is support that initiative by hosting this event. There was a summit at VTSU Randolph that was sold out this winter. So it's clear that more people wanted to participate than could. So we thought, hey, let's hold one in Southern Vermont, collaborate with our partners down here, and really try to attract more of those housing developers right to Rutland and show them point blank where that opportunity is. Do some site walks, connect them with resources. So that'll be June 11th at the Hub. We're really excited about that one. We're also working with the mayor and his working group for the Rutland City Ad Hoc Housing Working Group. It's a mouthful, to host a developer summit in the fall of 24. This is an event that we're going to try to recruit developers from throughout New England and New York and Vermont to come to Rutland and really market what is an opportunity for developing housing here, because we know it's real. We have the data to support it, but we don't have anyone significantly stepping up to this plate to, provide capital and development to these housing projects. So we're hopeful that this might sort of put Rutland on the map as a place that is ready to do business and build housing. So wanted to mention those two. We're excited about the opportunities. We'll see how that goes, because it will be certainly a big chance to show off what could be in Rutland City and beyond.
When we're talking about development, Devon, I probably should know this. I probably should have asked it a long time ago. Do we have enough local businesses that work in the construction industry and the development kind of thing to accomplish all of what we need? Or are we going to depend, as Killington, I'm sure, is when they build the village center that they're going to be building, they're going to have to take a look at outside resources, I'm sure. Where are we with that? Are there enough local people? You hear about this business and that business. Is there enough here?
That's a great question, Brian. And we know definitively no, there are not. In terms of that Killington project, Great Gulf, the developer, is going to bring in hundreds of tradesmen to get that work completed. And actually, we may even be looking at developing some workforce housing just to accommodate all those folks. And that could even exist in Rutland. So we're excited about that opportunity. We know for a fact that part of the price increases and part of the lack of development is due to a lack of contractors. There's no doubt. How we are trying to help support this issue and address it is we just recently resurrected the Rutland Region Workforce Investment Board. This is a long-standing workforce development kind of group that through COVID sort of fell away. The RPC grabbed it, and we've been trying to work to resurrect it for some time. We're able to get that committee reformed this spring. We've been meeting monthly since, and we've actually identified a federal funding opportunity that would provide 3 years of sustaining funding to the region for this singular goal. Actually, we want to create a workforce development program that would pay and partner with existing contractors like electrical, plumbing, building folks, HVAC folks that exist within the region, and connect them directly with local young folks coming either at the later years of high school or just after high school, and allow them to create a pipeline to these workforce opportunities and really address this issue. 45% of the seniors coming out of Rutland County high schools are not going to college. Mm-hmm. We can capture some of that 45%, which is not insignificant. It's hundreds of folks to enter these trades and try to fill this gap. We're really excited about this opportunity. We're hopeful we can get the money, because without it, it will be really hard to initiate a program of this scale. And it will complement the other things that are happening within Stafford, within Vermont Community College, and several of the Department of Labor. Several of these groups are working in the same direction. And what we're hoping to do with the WIB is bring everyone in and not duplicate efforts, and really complement all the work and share information. Because if we're not doing that, then we're just siloed and nothing's getting done, right? Yeah. So we're excited about that, and you're absolutely right. It's a problem, and there's really no obvious solution without direct intervention. So we're hopeful with that.
One of the things that amazed me, and I think you might have been at the presentation from Great Gulf when we had a breakfast up on the mountain, and one of the things that Mike, I think it's Sneed, I can't remember. I believe
that's correct.
His name.
Yeah,
he said, and it dawned on me at the time, and I went, "Wow! If you started your own trucking business in 2024." And we're part of this amazing development up there, you would be guaranteed 25 years of employment just moving lumber and paint and wallboard and all that kind of stuff back and forth to this project. I mean, literally, your whole career could be based on that one project.
Yeah.
And that blew me away.
It's really hard to fathom. This will be the single biggest investment in Vermont's history into one project, $3 billion. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of mixed feelings from around the region as to what the impacts will be to Rutland County, good, bad, or otherwise. But we are really focusing on the good, and that, you're right. Here are these huge opportunities to grow local businesses, not outside contractors coming into Vermont from down south or the mid-Atlantic states, but do it right here and put money into our pockets that can be spent locally. So, this is something that we really need to try to get the word out, because I guarantee you people will step up to the plate. They may need some capital to invest in equipment and trucks and whatever it is, but knowing that they have secured, like you said, 2.5 decades of work going forward, I think you're willing to take that risk. So, yeah, I think it presents a tremendous opportunity. Killington is booming. Right now, we review Act 250 applications through the Regional Planning Commission as part of our Board of Commissioners. We had a meeting last night. We reviewed, again, another application from Killington right now, and this is outside of Great Gulf and the entire development. We're seeing more Act 250 housing applications coming from Killington than anywhere else, probably at a rate of 50-1. So, it's not just Great Gulf that's building housing up there. We're really hoping that how do we get this level of investment at the scale we want? Granted, we don't want $1 million McMansions that are being built there down here, right? We want a spectrum of homes, but we've got to believe that there's got to be some opportunity to make money for them and provide something for us down here as well.
And I share to some degree the concern of folks who say, all we're doing is putting McMansions up on the mountain, and is that really what we want to do? Well, guess what? Everybody that moves up there still needs food and the other services and all of that the rest of the county could provide. And I do think, I'm a capitalist at heart, and there's a ripple effect to that whole thing that I think everybody will make out better with. It just... Maybe some of the people that are living in a particular condo now will have the means to move to the next level up, if you want to look at it that way, thereby freeing up their condo for someone that's at a little lower level to move in. So I think there's certainly steps to be taken, and I think it's great for everybody. I don't think it's just catering to the rich people that are coming up here to ski and enjoy all that Killington has to offer. That's got to be part of it, or it wouldn't work.
I couldn't agree more. The difference now than I think in previous years or administrations is I've seen a real concerted effort of collaboration between Rutland City and Killington that I've never seen before. I've sat in meetings with the mayor and the town manager and the select board chair from Killington, and they want to make sure that this benefits Rutland City and far beyond. And I think it starts with just opening up the conversation and, burying any of these old sour grapes that they don't care if people come down to Rutland City. Well, absolutely. There's only one hospital. There's only one grocery store. Those things just don't exist. Like you said, those critical services are here. And I think there's a recognition now that we'll all benefit much greater if we do collaborate. And I think, that's one thing the RPC is really interested in trying to facilitate and nurture across the region. We see these similar things pop up in different communities, like Fairhaven, Cowson, and Pulteney. Trying to encourage more of that intermunicipal collaboration is key to our collective success. So, yeah.
And I think where Great Gulf, and they made an example and they showed us pictures, where they've developed in other areas in the country and outside the country, because it's a Canadian firm, and I don't know what the number was in terms of miles, but they have clear data that shows that whatever it is they developed, you could take 10 miles out, 11 miles, 12 miles, and that ripple effect had a positive influence on communities that were even 40 miles away. So I think really that, if it's done right, and I think it will be, they got some great people up at Killington right now that are running the show. The manager, Mike Solimano, really is into it and understands how things work, because you see him at all the Cedar events, and he's part of the community here too. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some cool things happening in Rutland too that may really capitalize on this particular development. For instance, the former Berwick site. Our brownfields program, we've been working closely with them. We have 9 projects around the region in Pittsford, Proctor, Pulteney, and Rutland City. And we've been doing a ton of assessment work. We've invested more than $200,000 into contaminant assessment at the former Berwick site. And we're encouraged to try to get some cleanup funding for the folks to redevelop that site and build a world-class boutique hotel right downtown, along with several living spaces that would support not only anyone coming off the mountain looking for a real downtown experience, but to support the development that's happening at the Paramount and far beyond. So, it's not to say that good things aren't happening here. That could really be a draw for folks that may be going to Killington for that development.
We got about a minute left. If you have anything else you just want to brush against quickly, we can do for another minute or so.
Yeah, no, just thank you so much for the opportunity, Brian. Hopefully we'll be back again soon to give you more updates. We are really encouraged at what we've been able to accomplish this past fiscal year. We're coming towards the end of our books, the end of June, and there's a lot of strong accomplishments. Rutland region is very strong. We're poised for opportunity, and the Regional Planning Commission is here to help realize and achieve those goals across the region. So, let's keep in touch, and I want to stay everyone informed as to the work that's happening here and around the county.
Well, we'll be glad to have you come back, Devon, for sure. And hopefully it won't be months away. It might be a month away. But we try to check in with the local administration every month. So the mayor is generally here once a month and lets us know what's going on. And he's got his own issues, I'm sure, that we can always keep talking about there. The road diet, we didn't mention that today because you're not directly involved with that, I don't think, but that has created, obviously, some resistance, and it will continue even by the time this program airs on, again, June 9th and June 16th. We're still going to be right in the middle of that, so I hope it all works out. I was pretty clear with the mayor. I would have voted no. I didn't think it worked 10 years ago, and I don't think it's going to this year, but I also said I'm trying to keep an open mind, and if it does work, I'll be one of the first people that will find you and shake your hand and say I was wrong, and congratulations, and it seems to be working. But all of that to come, I guess.
Sounds good.
Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society. We're looking forward to the 178th Vermont State Fair in Rutland, and we'll have Robert Congdon on in a future show. And we hope you join us next week for another Catamount Community Connection.